أجدد تحية لكم حضورنا الكريم من السيدات والسادة، وعودا مجيدا لكم. نستكمل الآن فعاليات منتدى دبي العالمي لإدارة المشاريع مع جلسة نقاشية. هذه الجلسة تحمل عنوان الصناعة والابتكار، يديرها بالطبع مقدم البرامج الشهير السيد ريتشارد دين، وندعوه لتقديم الضيوف الكرام المشاركين في هذه الجلسة. رحبوا بهم جميعا، ترحيبكم هو إشارة دخولهم.
شكرا جزيلا. أهلا وسهلا. I am delighted to welcome you to the next panel this afternoon, our first one after lunch. Talking about the three I's today. We're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about industrialization, and we're talking about innovation in a number of different fields. Will you please join me in welcoming my distinguished panel today? First up, thank you very much indeed, His Excellency Khalfan Belhoul, please join us, Chief Executive Officer of the Dubai Future Foundation. We also have His Excellency Omran Sharaf, Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation for Advanced Science and Technology. And joining us from Boston, Massachusetts in the United States, Dr. Kolo Ratti, Professor of Urban Technologies at MIT, Planning Director at MIT Sensible City Lab. Gentlemen, please join me on stage now. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to go and take my seat, and then we'll get straight into some of the questions that we're going to be discussing today on stage. And some of the issues we're looking at today: innovative, sustainable technologies. How could they help humanity to meet the future needs of growing populations? Your Excellency, nice to see you. Thank you very much indeed for being with us today. And how innovation in infrastructure and industry can provide the basic physical systems and structures that are essential to the operation of society. So let's jump straight into this now. Your Excellency Khalfan Belhoul, can I start with you, sir?
Of course.
Let's talk about the main innovation areas that Dubai Future Foundation, your organization, is focusing on, not just this year, but next year as well, into the future. How will these innovations foster the well-being of Dubai citizens? I ask that selfishly, because I am a Dubai citizen, the residents and the visitors.
First of all, if you allow me, thanks for having me. I'd like to thank His Excellency Matar al-Tayer and the event and the Road Transportation Authority for having me here. And thanks to you for running this panel. And honored to be with my fellow panelists. Glad to see my friend Imran, and good to see you, Carlo, after the cold weather in Davos. Less layers of clothing on you now, but I'm sure we'll have a good conversation. I think maybe in a nutshell, for those of you that don't know the Dubai Future Foundation, maybe a quick a brief of how it was formed, so then we can focus on how it really reflects on the well-being and on the job opportunities. But in summary, the Dubai Future Foundation really reflects the way the leadership of this nation think. It's simply a lab for Dubai and for the United Arab Emirates. His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, around 6 years ago, while passing by the World Government Summit, which is the flagship gathering of Dubai that gathers more than 3,000 delegates from all over the world, had a really small immersive experience, which was called the Museum of the Future. It's not this Museum of the Future, but it was the inception and the formation of the Dubai Future Foundation. It was probably an experience maybe 3 or 4 times the size of this white space we're sitting on here. And the idea was for the delegates to really see an immersive experience of how, what are the future challenges. And people would walk through an immersive experience looking at dialogues and displays related to the future of food or the future of interaction of humanity with robotics, AI, blockchain, the digital economy. And it only took one visit from His Highness, literally one visit, to really come out of the other side of this experience and saying, hold on, this dialogue, 1, should not be confined to 3,000 people, and 2, this dialogue should be institutionalized. We need to create a process for designing the future. So that seed of vision was that we want to institutionalize this thinking, and we want to spread it for everyone around the world from Dubai. And that's the beauty of our leaders. They really plant the seed, and then you have to figure out how this works. And when it comes to something as agnostic as the future mandate, it's not something that's easy to benchmark against because it simply doesn't exist. So the idea was we need to create a process and we need to create a plan. So you can imagine us in the first 2 years of the foundation really coming up with different projects, one of which giving that small immersive experience a bit of steroids and creating the most beautiful building in the world, hopefully, with that same immersive experience that actually takes people around in a way where His Highness wants it to be seen to the rest of the world. And thankfully, that project has been doing fantastically well. Tickets have been sold out. If you need any tickets, I think I know someone there, my friend. But
You've got some wasta.
Yes, we have some wasta there. But it's been doing extremely well. That's one of our projects. But to your point, and for me, just to wrap up, that museum has been reflected in one of the most amazing buildings. But not only that, the idea of the Dubai Future Foundation is really to focus on future foresight, come up with different mega trends, and then do something about that. So if the innovation ecosystem requires double downing on venture capital, we launch a venture capital fund to catalyze the ecosystem. So we have this billion dirham fund that focuses on catalyzing the ecosystem in partnership with the DIFC. If the innovation ecosystem requires entrepreneurial activities, we've launched the Dubai Future Accelerators. We understand through our research that there needs to be more effort, consolidated effort when it comes to research and development and applied research to really have in-country driven talent. The digital economy needs a lot of that talent, and we need a combination of importing and also developing local talent. So there's major investment on research and applied research. His Highness Sheikh Hamdan, the Crown Prince, and the Chairman of the Executive Council, and also the Chairman of our Board of Trustees has also re-emphasized on this important and launched the R&D strategy through the Dubai Future Foundation. So in summary, we have more than 15 projects right now that we oversee, but at the same time, we constantly look at mega trends and we work very closely with our stakeholders to make sure that they are executed. Most of the time, we aren't the people that execute it. For example, with the Road and Transportation Authority, who play an outstanding role in running the future of the autonomous mobility and beyond. They are the executors of this mandate. We work very closely with them. If there is a white space that's not owned by a government agency, then we incubate it in the Dubai Future Foundation. For example, robotics. Another example is this unknown crazy world called the metaverse, which we know has more than $5 trillion worth of basically impact on GDP at a global level by 2030. We need to have a say on it, and we need to explore that white space so it stays with us until there's some kind of execution plan for it to go forward. We understand its pros and cons, but again, one of His Highness's key messages to us is the biggest risk is really not to take risk. And that's why I think Dubai is a leading city of the future.
And of course, we have VARA, don't we? The Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority, which is driving.
Which is an outcome that really virtual assets have their value, but they need some kind of a regulation. And Dubai being, like I said, making big bets on things that really have major potential on humanity, not only in Dubai, but the rest of the world. This authority has been set up to kind of regulate it.
Khalfan, thank you very much indeed. Your Excellency, if I can turn to you first of all. So a couple of questions. I'm interested in your role with the Mars mission, which was very significant. As project manager of the Mars mission, looking at some of the main innovative solutions that were used there and what you've learned, but also your relatively new role as His Excellency, the Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation for Advanced Science and Technology. May I begin, if you don't mind, by asking you a little bit about this ministerial role that you have and what you're trying to achieve with that?
First of all, again, thank you for having me here. It's such a pleasure and honor. Regarding my role currently within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the idea is to have this new vertical established within our ministry to link our foreign policy to our national priorities in science and technology. And also to make sure that we utilize our foreign policy to cater for the needs and accelerate kind of the development and capacity development in the ecosystem that we have in the UAE. So this, just in brief, why this vertical was established within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And when it comes to the Emirates Mars mission, and when it comes to innovation, and this is one thing that we always try to highlight, and one of the main lessons learned out of the Emirates Mars mission, and it's something that the UAE took the lead in it, and it's a model that we actually try to share with the rest of the world about how to be more efficient and effective in conducting deep space missions. Missions like the Emirates Mars mission usually take 10 to 12 years to develop. Missions like the Emirates Mars mission usually take more than 2 times or 3 times the budget that was actually allocated to the Emirates Mars mission. But the reason why we were able to deliver this mission in 6 years rather than 10 to 12 years is because we tried to be innovative not just in our system design, but also in our approach to things. So the innovation also goes in how do we collaborate with nations. So, and that was based on the first requirement given to us by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, which was, don't start from scratch, start where others ended, learn from others. We had 400 people working on the mission. Out of the 450, people working on the mission. Out of the 400 people working on the mission. Out of the 400, 200 were Emiratis. 150 were our knowledge transfer partners, and about 100 subcontractors from around the world. Our knowledge transfer partners were the University of Colorado at Boulder, Arizona State University, and University of California, Berkeley. We all worked together as one team, as Emirates Mars mission team. When it came to the system design, and again, it's the first time that the UAE sends a mission to Mars, high risk. 50% of the missions that have been sent to Mars have failed. So to reduce that risk, what we did is we took an innovative approach in designing the system. Usually systems have redundancies, and in our case, we decided to go with selective redundancy, not full-on redundancy. Why? It makes it cheaper, it makes it easier to test, it makes it less complicated from a design point of view. Because if I'm gonna do full-on redundancies, for example, that means I won't have enough time to test it fully, because it's just 6 years versus 10 to 12 years. And that means if I don't test it fully, then the bugs that are in the designs will be also in the redundant subsystems. So that's why we decided to become selective with the redundancy, and we took the single string approach, which a lot of experts had a concern and worry about. But it worked, thank God. And the other thing is that when it came to the design of the system, we tried to apply innovation in the mission design, in the system design, in the sense that we didn't have to build things from scratch. So the subsystems itself, the designs of the subsystems, they were done by the team, but those designs have heritage. So the team, the Emirates Mars mission team, designed those, but it's not something that is, that is patented or that's novel just for us. It's a design that's available. It's the first time we do it, but it's been applied and it worked. So we tried to keep the innovation at the mission design level, the orbit that we chose, the science that we did, the way that we utilize the science instruments. These instruments have been used before, but we designed it for our needs and used it in a different way to answer our questions. So this is how we try to be innovative, and this is how actually we try to be efficient and deliver the mission for less than $200 million.
Thank you very much indeed for those insights. Dr. Carlo Ratti, if I may turn to you now, your perspective from Boston, Massachusetts, and MIT. Can we ask you about some of the major new innovations from around the world and how, to tie it in with my question to Khalfan earlier, how they're going to benefit all of us in this room and human life? And of course, the one on everyone's lips at the moment is ChatGPT. Microsoft just confirming a $10 billion investment in the parent company of that. But there are others as well. How do you scan that landscape?
Sure. Well, first of all, and thanks again. It's a great pleasure to be back here. Before getting to that, I just want to add to what was mentioned before about it's very important to get a methodology in order to innovate. And what is very important is, innovation is taking risks. It's a bit what nature does. If you think of what nature does, it tries mutations. Some of them are successful, some of them are less successful. But somehow, that's a model, the methodology, and that's why, it's very interesting to see what's happening at the Museum of the Future as a way to take risks, see what works, and you need to fail sometimes. Because you fail, and by failing, you learn actually, where you shouldn't go and other routes that might open up. But going back to your point, so innovation about in which dimension, I would say something that ties together a lot of the things you were saying is really data. What's happening today, in what we do at MIT is look at one particular domain, that's the space of cities. But so what is happening is the convergence of digital and physical. The same thing is happening in industry. People call it, Industry 4.0. It's happening in homes, smart homes. But when you look at the city, the same convergence is happening. And then, that allows you to have both the physical city, but also a digital twin, another representation. And that's where then you can use artificial intelligence. You can use all the different new ways to analyze the data. We wouldn't be able to do that unless we had this kind of digital representation of the physical world that then allows us, again, to better understand what is going on in the city and then finally feedback into the space we live in. So somehow, in effect, to summarize with just one word would be really data, because that's the enabler for a lot of the things we're discussing.
So moving on from that, Your Excellency Khalfan, from Dubai's point of view, what do you see as the key areas in terms of innovation and also technology, and the ones that need a little bit more research and development, a little bit more investigation? Do they really have the potential to drive economic growth? Do they really have the potential to create, for example, job opportunities?
Yeah, the usual ones are a priority when you think about it. First of all, I'll talk about, since this is an RTA-driven event, we have to even mention the fact that obviously the mobility and the autonomous mobility strategy, and not because this is their event, but the mobility and the autonomous mobility obviously will have a key contribution on the transformation of transportation within the ecosystem. So testing different technologies, enabling those technologies will be significant. But the most important thing, which we are blessed to have here in this country, is that we have the agility on the regulatory front. You can have the most innovative solutions and the most innovative brains from the world. If you do not have the most agile system to amend your regulations in favor of those innovations, none of this will mean anything. And I think we're blessed with leadership here that create bridges to policymakers, to decision platforms, whether it's the cabinet at a federal level or the Supreme Legislative Committee at a local level, where we have full access to them. And this reminds me of a story with His Highness the Crown Prince once, and we had a gathering once with different entrepreneurs from all over the world, and His Highness Sheikh Hamdan wanted to appreciate those entrepreneurs. So he invited them to go cycling. And this was a group of around 50 individuals, some of which were innovators, some were venture capitalists, some were from the government sector. And they were all very excited to meet His Highness. And his intent was simply appreciation of what they're doing for the advanced economy and the fourth industrial revolution. He had zero agenda other than just appreciating them. So we gather in his sports complex, and everyone's obviously excited. They're on their bikes, and he comes in, he huddles up with everyone, and he said, we're here today to enjoy our time. There's nothing I want to leave you with except one thing. He said, anything can be changed in Dubai, and let's go cycling. And it ended there. And I got calls from individuals saying, this is probably the best thing we would have wanted to hear, because we didn't want to hear that this is going to be funded or there's this capital. We wanted to hear that government is willing to make change. And if policy can be changed, and if it comes straight from the Crown Prince that policy can be amended in favor of innovation, then this is the biggest asset for autonomous mobility to be tested, to create that test zone, that sandbox mindset to make sure that those spaces for driverless cars can work. So going back to your question, driverless and autonomous mobility is obviously a game changer. At some point, I think the highest density of cranes around the world were in Dubai. Shows you that there's major construction technology involved, which means that 3D printing construction is obviously something very important that we need to invest in. So those are more the tangible sides. On the non-tangibles, you look at the enablement of the DIFC, and you've mentioned VARA as well. How can we enable that, the transactions to be seamless yet safe? And that's easier said than done. And this takes me to the last sector maybe that we'll talk about, which is the whole virtual world. And I'm telling you, this world is amazing and scary at the same time. We just came back from Davos, and there was this immersive experience run by Microsoft, Accenture, and the World Economic Forum, where I was honored to be part of that journey with His Excellency Mohammed Al-Gargawi, the Minister of Cabinet Affairs, and obviously the Vice Chairman of the Dubai Future Foundation. They took us through this virtual world that they've called the village. And they transported us to different locations where we actually interacted with different avatars. We were all sitting separately in different spaces. And it's scary how you can really get used to it, and you can see the value. And we haven't even scratched the surface yet on how valuable this can be. So when you think about the pros that I've mentioned earlier, the contribution of this digital world to economies, that's amazing. But if you look at it at the same time, it's calculated that the average critical, let's say, cybercrime case averages around $4 million per case when it comes to, and that's an average critical case. So when you look at the cases, this can reach to billions and trillions worth of disadvantages of this world. And how can you really mitigate the risk that comes from all the pros that can come? So you have major GDP upside, but you also have the openness of this this challenge. And last but not least, I know maybe I sound like a broken record with this, and being in the Dubai Future Foundation, people would think I'm really pro-technology, which I am, but I'm also pro-well-being. And I see the immersiveness of individuals into the technology in the younger generation, and how amazingly smart they are when it comes to sitting in front of the screen and deep diving to this technology. But then you see other flags coming up. You see obesity, you see non-activity, you see less social skills, and those need to be balanced. How can we really strike the balance with them being super smart in front of the screens, whether it was a game or whether it was an immersive experience? And like I said, we didn't even start this virtual world yet, so we really need to pay attention on how our kids maintain those skills as well while we dive into this virtual world.
Well, I guess one of the ways we stay fit is with 19th century technology like bicycles. Keeping up with His Highness Sheikh Hamdan cannot be easy. He's quite a fit athlete.
He is, and he's also very agnostic in his talents in sport, so that's very challenging for us.
Thanks for sharing that with us. Your Excellency Omran, if I could turn to you, and looking at the space mission, which you touched on a little bit earlier on, but how do you plan and implement a mission like that? Can you share a little bit of behind the scenes of how it works? What project management techniques are suitable for such a project? And what lessons can we all learn from that here today?
There's a lot of lessons. And the first thing that you need to understand or master at the beginning of any high-risk projects in general or high-impact project is understanding the requirements from the stakeholders. Not the technical ones, the actual requirements. This mission, the Emirates Mars mission, was not a scientific mission. It was a national strategic mission to accelerate the development of our science and technology sector in the UAE. So the UAE wanted to do that big shift in the mindset of the Emirati youth, big shift in the mindset of the Arab youth, big shift within our ecosystem. It looked at Mars. So the team had to understand that first. And His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, when he first met us, he gave us a set of requirements. And one of them, I mentioned it. Basically, he said, don't start from scratch, start where others ended. But then he said, I want to reach Mars before the 2nd of December, 2021. And that was, actually, when we met him, it was end of 2013, early 2014. So we had literally 6 years to deliver the mission. And he said, build it, don't buy it.
Okay.
And one other thing that was made clear to us was that this mission by him is not about just reaching Mars. Your job as a team is not to reach Mars, but your job also, I will assist you and evaluate you on creating the impact out of this mission. So you will have to lead that as a team. So the same team that was developing the scientific aspect and the technical aspect of the mission had to also formulate solutions to create impact in our educational sector, in our academic sector, in our industrial sector, working with our private sector, and working with other government entities in trying to kind of set the foundation for our science and technology sector.
And you had to do that in parallel.
Yes.
You had the mission to Mars, and you wanted that to be a success, and it was.
Yes.
But in parallel, you had these other social and national goals as well.
Yes. And so based on these things, we went and formulated our technical and scientific requirements for the mission, but then also our kind of operational plans for the strategic goals that were set for the mission also to create the kind of the foundation needed for our ecosystem. And one important thing that I don't know that, I mean, that's from my point of view, is that a lot of people working on such missions sometimes mix up or confuse accountability, responsibility, and delegation of authority. And you see people who delegate accountability and responsibility, but they maintain the decision-making power. Some delegate the decision-making power and delegate accountability, but they keep responsibility. The key here is, as a leader, you need to, at the end of the day, to empower your team. You need them to trust you, and you need to trust them. To do that, you delegate responsibility. You delegate authority, but you do not delegate accountability. Accountability stays on you as the leader. That's the only way your team will be able to be creative, innovative, push the boundaries. They will mess up, and you will be held accountable for it, but that's part of the process. It's okay. So for me, this was very critical that basically I had to delegate authority. I had to delegate responsibility, but the accountability always stayed with me. I had 7 deputies in the mission, each one focused on different areas, and all of them had full authorities to work on the mission. And this was basically based on the direction that we received actually from Mizana Sheikh Hamdan bin Mohammed, because he's also the president of Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center, and he was overseeing the project. And one of the things that he made it very clear to me and to the team since day one, and to me very clearly, he's like, I want this mission to prepare leaders. To prepare leaders, you have to give them the opportunity. And that's what basically played a big role. And that's when you need to know also when to be micro and when to be macro. So you cannot just be macro the whole time. You cannot just be micro the whole time. You need to mix it up and know where to put your efforts into the areas that are currently high priorities to be micro level at, and then pull back when things start moving forward. So these are the lessons learned that I would like to share with everyone that basically we applied in the Emirates Mars mission and try to apply it in different areas with our new kind of roles currently within the government.
Thank you for those insights. Dr. Carlo, following on from that, if I could ask you from your experience, what technologies do you see coming and revolutionizing, in particular, industrial capacity? And I want to briefly pick up on something that His Excellency Khalfan mentioned earlier, the fact that you were both at the World Economic Forum in Davos last week, and the metaverse was one of those technologies. I don't want you to limit your answer to the metaverse, but I'd like to get your thoughts on that. Hype or reality?
Yeah, and let me tell you, I see something very exciting, and it's also something that concerns me. Let's start maybe with the exciting thing. The exciting thing is, in this conversion, digital and physical, the more we can create interfaces in order to seamlessly go from one to the other. And as I mentioned before, artificial intelligence only works in the digital side, the side of data. So somehow that's a way to bring more intelligence to our cities, to the places we're living, and so on. But let me tell you what I'm more concerned about that Khalfan mentioned a moment ago. You mentioned Davos. Yes, we're in Davos last week, but it's like here. That's why are we here together? Well, that's really because some of the conversations happening here in physical space, they're not happening in digital space. And that is about serendipity. It's about finding what you're not looking for. You can measure that. We over the past year, we analyzed a lot of data on the MIT campus. And what we saw is that during lockdown, when people were meeting in physical way on the MIT campus, then our social networks suffered a lot. And so what I want to say is that the other side of the metaverse, the side that's more about gaming, about being much more in our own bubbles instead of in physical space, I think could be risky from this point of view. So we need to be very, very careful about that. And again, the reason we are all here today is because what happens here in physical space, in the space of the city, in public space, in our offices, but somehow not in the digital space, but with physical interactions, well, that is still very unique.
Your Excellency Khalfan, you've been talking about the organization that you run, the Dubai Future Foundation, and I've got to say, it sounds like a really cool place to work. But what are the skills and competencies that you look for when you're hiring people for your organization, but more broadly speaking, the kind of skills and competencies that people are going to be looking for going forward?
It's funny you mentioned this because I was just having a discussion with Mr. Ahmed Bahrouzian Bouammar earlier about the qualities of people that we look at, and you'd be surprised. People would think that we look at specialists, technologists, people, of course, in specific niche requirements. Those are requirements, but the simple requirements for us at the Future Foundation is the personality, the agility, the willingness to adapt, and to be agile. It's as simple as that. And you have that hunger to work. Why is that? It's simply because we're an extremely agnostic mandate, which means that one day we'll be speaking about the digital world, the next day we're talking about autonomous mobility, the next day we're talking about climate change. Obviously, we can't do everything, but we need to prioritize, which means that we kind of also become, and going back to Imran's point about building leaders, we really are a white space for leader development in specific areas that are new to the world, and that's why it's linked to the future. And the best example you can think about in this mindset is, I think about His Excellency Umar Al-Ulama, the Minister of Artificial Intelligence, who also plays a massive role at the Future Foundation and part of the members of Board of Trustees. I can assure you that before having the mandate, Umar wasn't the expert in AI, but he was a hungry person that was willing to learn. Now, His Excellency Umar is our lead expert. Why am I saying that? Because that was a complete white space at that time. AI was unknown, but there was an enablement, and there was a person willing to take that responsibility, and there was leadership that was delegating to people that are willing to. And you can clearly see, and I believe he had done a presentation. I wasn't here, but I work very closely with His Excellency, and I know his passion to AI and his immense knowledge in this space right now that has developed through his progression. So clearly this can go from, and this is maybe a high-level ministerial role, but I can talk to you even at a smaller scale. We have individuals right now that are assuming leadership in understanding the metaverse, and you never know where this goes and where they go when it comes to assuming leadership roles in this space. So you can imagine us just requiring the hunger, the agility. The career progression is not linear, if you will. You can go left and right, depending on your skill sets, and you can be deployed in different projects and different newly introduced white spaces that we own, that we can all learn together. And that's why I feel like my job is easier, because my job is really to ensure that there are leaders, they become the experts, and I just take the credit for it.
That's good to know. We'd all like to do that. Your Excellency Omran, if I could ask a similar question to you in terms of the skills and competencies that you were looking for when you were recruiting for the Mars mission, but also going forward as well. Of course, you want attitude and capability, but there is also a level of technical expertise that you need for something like that. So how do you approach recruitment when you look at skills and competencies?
The first requirement is that person needs to be humble to learn. Regardless of their experience, they have to be able and flexible enough to accept more knowledge from others, accept different views, and be flexible enough to also adapt new skills as needed. When it comes to technical, obviously, like a mission like Emirates Mars mission, you don't just focus on the technical and scientific skills. You also need people with, especially the fact that we had to create impact, people with strategic skills, people who have managerial skills, people who have analytical skills. People who are very broad when it comes to looking at things, and people and visionaries, and people who are very detailed. So it's a mix that you need to have of individuals that work together to deliver such mission. So there's no one kind of a character that is the perfect one, but there are few kind of merits that you expect them all to have, and that's the agility and ability to learn, and the flexibility to adapt. And kind of set the right team culture that's needed. So it's more about what's the team culture that you need. And the team culture that you need in these things is flexibility, adaptability, humbleness, and passion for what they're doing, regardless of their background.
So Dr. Carlo, if I can ask a similar question to you, when you and your colleagues at MIT one of the world's great universities, particularly when it comes to technology, but many other things as well. What are you looking for in students? Good grades, I guess, are a given. You're not going to be getting a seat at the table of MIT or another elite institution if you don't have good grades. But what is it that you're looking for in those 16, 17, 18-year-olds who want to go to MIT?
Yeah, well, you probably need to make a difference between the 18-year-old coming to MIT and being admitted for undergraduate and the people we have in the lab, so the researchers. They could be postgraduate students, they can be postdocs, or people later in their career. But I would say a couple of things. The first thing that's very important, and that applies to the campus as a whole, it applies to a lab, is really it's not about just individuals, but the combination of everybody. So how you can actually get synergies going on with diversity, with people coming from different backgrounds and so on. And so in that case, you see really that you make sure that the sum is more than individual parts. You create good synergies between the team, and that applies to our lab, but also is actually part of the big discussion in the United States today is about can universities promote diversity or not. As you know, the Supreme Court is looking at that as well. But certainly in the lab, we see that diversity, those synergies that happen in the group are vital in order to innovate. One important thing is that innovation we're discussing today is not happening anymore, maybe like 100 years ago in isolation. It's always teamwork. And then, the first thing is really looking at individuals, but embedded in a team. The other thing I would say is something else that I think we are seeing more and more in recent years. And, today we're exposed to so many things. You go online, somehow it's probably a bit less important to be very, very creative. The important thing is being able to tell a good idea from a bad idea. So somehow, you get exposed to so many different things just by going online, that the important thing becomes, your ability to see what is good and what is not good, what is right, what is not right. So that critical thing, I believe, is becoming more and more important because of the internet, because of our, as I said, the fact that we ideas are there anyway. The important thing is selecting them. And it reminds me something that Hemingway, the great writer, once said at the end of his life. He talked about what's the most important thing. He called it the bullshit detector. I think that's probably the most important thing, being able to tell what's a good idea, what's bullshit, what's not. What's a good idea, what's a bad idea is becoming more and more important.
And in terms of the talents that you're looking for, we're thinking about young Emiratis looking to go to an institution like MIT or one of its peer group. What would be the advice you'd give to those children they are now, who are in their teenage years and are studying at the moment? What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, probably I would say, be curious without boundaries. And the other important thing, we didn't discuss it too much, but it was coming through the conversation, is that innovation is really usually in between silos, in between disciplines. And so really, being curious, and don't be constrained by the fact you decide to do this, follow this path, and you're not looking at other paths. Ultimately, knowledge is integrated. There's a unity of knowledge, and a lot of the exciting things really are happening when you look at in between disciplines. So we say, being curious without boundaries.
And maybe I'd like to reassure on what Carlo had mentioned earlier on the acceptance of failure. This notion of failure needs to be really looked at deeply. At Dubai Future Foundation, we always appreciate those and call them pivoting moments and learning curves, and you have to do that, because this is, when something doesn't succeed, it means that you've went through a journey to really understand why it hasn't. So that's a wealth of knowledge that you really need to invest in. And if you look at the journey of Dubai and the growth of this nation in such a short period of time, from depending on pearl trading to depending on oil, all the way to talking about genome sequencing in such a short period of time, it's because our leaders think this way. And yes, we talk about our success moments, whether it's Dubai Ports or the RTA or Emirates Airlines or many others. We definitely went through learning points at the same time, and things didn't go our way through the journey of Dubai through that. But I think the mindset of our leaders really think like venture capitalists and entrepreneurs. And they bet on the winning ones, and they learn from the journeys that are answered. And if you continue that mindset as individuals and as entrepreneurs, then the sky's the limit on where you can reach.
Well, Your Excellency Omran, if I can pick up on that point, and it's all great to say, you have to celebrate failure. You have to embrace failure. If you don't take risks, you don't succeed. And yet, the Mars mission was so high profile for Dubai and the UAE. Can you give us some insight into the pressure to succeed? Obviously, there was a will for it to be successful, but also how the possibility of failure was addressed and adapted. Because it might not have succeeded. There was risk that it would fail. How did you internally approach that?
And Imran, you made us all panic when there was this 50% chance. I remember in the news, صح? كانت 50% failure rate when we got closer. This was a worrying moment for us, but he knows better.
So, for a mission announced by the late President His Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed and by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, in which they came out in July 2014 and told the world that we will reach Mars before the 2nd of December 2021, that by itself put a lot of pressure on us as a team. But since day one, it was made clear to us that we understand the risks as a leadership here in the UAE. We understand that there's a high chance of failure. However, we believe in you, and what we care about the most is impact. And before reaching Mars, before the 9th of Feb 2021, before the Mars orbit insertion, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid came out, His Highness Sheikh Hamdan bin Mohammed came out, and they all said, you've accomplished more than 90% of the mission. What's left is just the last 10%. His Highness Sheikh Hamdan came the day before, visited the team, and told them, for us, you've succeeded already. Doesn't matter what the results are, you have succeeded, and if it doesn't go the way we planned it to go, we will start again, we'll learn from our experiences, and we're not going to stop.
Because there was that moment when the probe was like slinging itself around Mars,
was the day
wasn't
before.
it? Yeah.
On the day, as we started the process of entering the orbit around Mars, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, His Highness Sheikh Hamdan bin Mohammed, His Highness Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed, His Highness Sheikh Saif bin Zayed,
Wow. That's a lineup.
all of them were at the center, halfway through the process of entering Mars. And the message was to the team, regardless what the results are, we succeed, we don't succeed in entering the orbit around Mars, we are here. We are here to thank you. We are here to send a message to everyone that we understand the risks and we've accepted the risks and we're not going to stop. So for me, that was basically a summary of the mission that day, when we had the whole leadership, from the president to the vice president, to the deputy prime ministers, Crown Prince of Dubai, all of them being there at the same time. I think that was a message to the whole world that they understood the risk and the whole UAE understands the risks and we are fine with whatever the results are. And that gave huge confidence even for the team on the day of arrival. And the reason why it was 50% is because, again, it's the first time we send a mission to Mars. The systems that we developed is the first time we developed it. And these systems, you can test it a lot on Earth. However, you cannot do the full testing, especially the propulsion system. You cannot test it as it is in space on Earth. The only way for you to verify it and to verify your design is to use it in space. And that was the first time that we used this design as a team of this propulsion system in space. So that's why it was actually 50%. I mean, for other countries, it would have been lower because they've done it multiple times before.
We've only got 3 minutes left. I've got to ask you, 30 seconds, how did it feel like when it landed?
Relieved, shocked, happy, and proud.
Alhamdulillah. Very quickly, gentlemen, if I can ask you a final question to each of you, 1 minute each and 1 minute only to our panelists. In 60 seconds, a word of advice that each of you would give to leaders and professionals here in this audience involved in innovation. Your Excellency Khalfan.
Well, first of all, thanking everyone for the amazing event here and having us being part of this. And my humble advice here is looking at the audience and the diversity of the audience is a strong message of how diverse and inclusive our community is. We have more than 190 nationalities. 90% of this population is driven by the expat community. We are a melting pot. We are, well, I'm not talking about Dubai Future Foundation, I'm talking about Dubai as a whole. We are the land of opportunity, and the sky is the limit on where you can reach with your ideas. His Highness's message, like I said, is that Dubai is a lab for the world. Like I also said, that we have access to amend innovation in favor of all your great ideas. So my message is zero hesitation when it comes to great ideas. There has been strong emphasis lately on how important Dubai's mission in the 2033 or D33 plan going forward. It's highly dependent on human capital. And this is very much needed. And like I said, the access and the doors are always open. We learn together, we make mistakes together, but we really double down on the winning bests.
Your Excellency Omran, a quick word from you on advice when it comes to innovation.
Understand the goals very well, the strategic goals behind whatever you're doing. Plan, and again plan. It's never going to be as per the plan, but it will help you move forward and will help you mitigate risks. And last but not least, understand that with responsibility comes accountability. If you want to be a leader, you have to be accountable and you need to accept it.
Thank you very much indeed, Shukran Jazeelan. And finally, Dr. Kolorati, a quick word for you, advice on innovation.
Well, we just heard, plan, and I would say as a counterpoint to that, I would say three most important things are take risk, and risk. I mean, that's really how we can innovate.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll leave it there. My thanks to our panelists today. You just heard from Dr. Kolorati there. Let's show our appreciation. Professor of Urban Technologies at MIT and Planning Director of MIT Sensible City Lab. His Excellency Omran Sharaf as well. Appreciate your time, sir. Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation for Advanced Science and Technology. And His Excellency Khalfan Belhoul, Chief Executive Officer of Dubai Future Foundation. Shukran Jazeelan.
Thank you.